Greetings and welcome back to the Cinema Sanctum. Tonight I'm going to be talking about director Frank Henenlotter's 1982 cult film Basket Case.
What is the secret Dwayne is hiding in the basket?
Basket Case tells the story of a basket-carrying loner who ventures to the Big Apple in search of the doctors who wrongfully separated him from his conjoined and devilishly deformed twin brother. But horror ensues when his unassuming arrival at a seedy hotel sets off a shocking series of events which all seem to lead back to the same question. What's in the basket? Distributed by Analysis Film Release Incorporation, this 1 hour, 31-minute R-rated horror comedy stars Kevin Van Hedrick, Terry Susan Smith, Beverly Bonner, and Robert Vogel. So here's my spoiler-free review of Basket Case. Look, I'm going to keep this brief because Basket Case is best experienced with little to no knowledge of what's coming, and that's exactly how I went into it when I picked it up in the video store in the late 90s as a kid. But I'll say this, don't go in expecting some modern visual extravaganza. It's a gritty, low-budget cult film shot on 16mm for roughly $35,000 in the early 1980s, which if you do the math, and I suck at math, means it would have cost about $120,000 in today's economy. The picture naturally is going to be grainy, and it's meant to be presented in a 137:1 aspect ratio, which is basically 4:3. So, you're going to have vertical black bars on the side of the screen. Get over it. It's a pretty absurd, but interesting story of vengeance, focusing on two previously conjoined twin brothers, Dwayne, who's a weirdo, played by Kevin Van Hedrick, and Belial, who's a living, breathing, murderous fucking nightmare. Here's the thing about Basket Case. Every performance is bizarre in some way, either because the actors are just off the wall or because the people playing some of the parts aren't actors at all. As a result, there's a real homegrown feeling to the film, but in a good way, in an authentic way that allows it to almost feel like a looking glass back into pre-Giuliani New York City. Back when hookers were easier to find than hot dogs. Which is largely thanks to Bruce Torbert's headroom-heavy, down-and-dirty cinematography. Now, I won't get too into the weeds on performances because really it's not that kind of flick. But my favorite character in the film has always been the hotel manager, played by the late Robert Vogel. He's funny, he's got some great lines, his whole attitude feels classic blue-collar New Yorker for that era. But generally, everyone in the film feels like they popped off the page of some quirky pulp horror comic. And I think that's probably a combination of the premise, the script, their own oddball presence, and director Frank Henenlotter's fucked up mind. This sort of acting works in a film like Basket Case because everything's chaotic, so nothing or anybody can possibly be distracting. Of course, I can't talk about Basket Case without mentioning Belial. You've seen the trailer, you've seen the artwork, you know what he looks like. It's a great, effective little prop with a truly strange design. As a kid, I found the idea of something like him frightening. As an adult, I think he's just kind of gross. Overall, the gore in the film is a nice fat glob of well-done schlock. It's graphic, but not ultra-realistic, so you can still find humor in the violence. The score from composer Gus Russo ranges from bombastic to strangely melodic. I feel like it appropriately accompanies the story as it unfolds and definitely gives the overall atmosphere a layer of audible grime, which gave me the impression this was meant to feature like a red light district urban legend. So, yeah, I'll admit, I don't have extensive knowledge of writer-director Frank Henenlotter's other work beyond Basket Case, Brain Damage, and Frankenhooker, but I think I've seen enough to say his creative mind is a bit warped. Yet for all the insanity he puts on display, one thing stands out to me. He understands how to tell a story. I think his energy and his passion for making Basket Case is the main reason the film has endured for decades. And whether it's your kind of movie or not, I think that will translate universally. So if you're looking for a film that's unique in almost every way, has entertaining practical effects, a good bit of gore, and may even give you a laugh or two, I recommend giving Basket Case a shot. Just maybe not while eating dinner.
Open it, if you dare. Basket Case.
Now, let's get physical. Basket Case is now available on 4K UHD and HDR from Arrow Video. There are two different versions of this release, a limited edition and this Arrow exclusive edition, which, as of the recording of this video, is unfortunately sold out. So what's the difference between the two of them? A VHS slipcover. Other than that, both editions contain a reversible sleeve, poster, collector's booklet, and one disc with the exact same transfer and a mountain of special features. Those special features include audio commentaries from director Frank Henenlotterr, actor Kevin Van Hedrick, and more. It's packed with shorts, featurettes, documentaries, archival footage, photos, artwork galleries, along with trailers, TV, and radio spots. For more information on this release, please visit the Arrow Video website. I've linked in the description below. For this physical media spotlight, I didn't do any sort of comparison to previous editions of the film. I've seen this film on VHS, I've seen this film on DVD, it's never been pretty to look at, so I'll be talking solely about my experience screening Arrow's 4K release. Here are my thoughts. I'm pretty sure this is the best basket cases ever and possibly will ever look. It's a 16mm film, it's not supposed to look polished. I think this transfer honors the medium and the style of the original print. All the grain and the half head of hair that was trapped in the gate remains present, and for that I applaud everyone involved. The image quality is clear, but everything about it is as dirty as a set of Broslin Hotel bed sheets. It's a great, respectful restoration from the folks at MoMA and an excellent way to view the film. Audio-wise, everything is clear and balanced. Any sort of audible anomaly was absolutely due to an issue during filming, but aside from the occasional muffled line, there's nothing worth mentioning. As for the packaging, I love the exclusive slipcover with the VHS color scheme that looks like it's been dipped in radioactive toxic waste. All the artwork from Graham Humphreys and Sarah Deck is exceptional. Likewise, the collector's booklet featuring writing by Michael Gingold and Martin Trafford's comic strip is really a nice touch. And now look, it took me a day to get through all the special features, which I'll be honest, range in quality. You got stuff that looks like it was shot professionally, stuff that looks like it was shot on a cell phone. Some things, they've been used before, some things are newer. You get everything from stop-motion animation to some guy giving an interview with his dick out. But I did have a few favorites worth mentioning. First, there's Belial's Dream, which is a 5-minute animated short from filmmaker Robert Morgan. Next, I thought it was a great idea to include Frank Henenlotter's first directorial effort, Slash of the Knife, which I felt was a natural precursor to Basket Case, once again proving that despite an odd premise, the guy can definitely tell a story. Finally, there's the archival location featurette In Search of the Hotel Broslin, which I found to be unintentionally hilarious at times, pure comedy gold. Overall, I'm very happy I purchased this release of Basket Case from Arrow Video. It wasn't the title that I was clamoring for, but now that I've revisited it and had an opportunity to learn about its history, it's a welcome addition to my ever-growing 4K collection. I recommend it. At this point, if you haven't seen Basket Case and don't want anything spoiled, it's best to stop watching until you do, because this next segment will be spoiler heavy and I'd hate to ruin the film for you. Alright, let's talk spoilers. I can remember going to my local video store as a kid and frequently passing the Basket Case VHS on the shelf. It always looked a bit off because the box they had was some generic case. It had a faded black and white photocopy of the original artwork. I don't know, it was probably taken from some issue of Fangoria or something like that. Anyway, as a result, it didn't pop out like some of the other titles that surrounded it. Eventually, I did end up giving it a shot, and I'm not sure who or what tempted me to do that, to finally rent it, but I do remember being very disturbed at 12 years old. Looking back, I can't say that I completely appreciated its cult status or the window to the past it offered, but I certainly do now. I was born in the mid-1980s, not far from Manhattan, but by the time I was getting brought to the city, it had already been cleaned up quite a bit. So it's always interesting to see a glimpse of the sleazy New York that was. Now, if you recall, I made mention of Bruce Torbert's cinematography being somewhat responsible for that. I just want to say I will never recommend framing shots with that much headroom. I cannot stand too much headroom, but because he did, more of the scenic than we had any right to see was visible, and for the sake of atmosphere, this is an extremely rare occasion where it actually didn't bother me. There were several scenes throughout the film, mainly when Dwayne is walking the streets, where I felt like I was watching a more cinema verite approach of filmmaking, with a living background of people that may have not even known they were being put in a movie. It's an interesting change. It doesn't overplay its hand, but it's definitely noticeable against the more blocked out scenes throughout the film. And I'm not sure if this was due to some intent or the budget or the lack of permits, probably the lack of permits, but whatever it was, it worked. For obvious reasons, Basket Case has all the tells of a low-budget indie film. You get the unusual editing, sometimes laughably choppy to accommodate blocking issues or botched takes or gags that didn't work. There's a series of cuts when Dwayne arrives at the Hotel Broslin where characters are just talking, literally having a conversation, and yet it jumps all over the place for no reason. You would think some big action piece was happening. No, they're just chatting. Cut, 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 cut. The characters themselves are strange, but even when the performances are textbook bad acting, there's still memorable exchanges. Like I said earlier, the best performance to me is always going to be Robert Vogel. He's the hotel manager. He's like Dennis Franz's sleazy cousin. He's rude, he's loud, he's struggling to keep it together. His hotel's literally turning into a hellhole in front of his eyes, and he's running up and down the steps all the time. He's kind of aggravated. I love it. The denizens of the seedy Hotel Broslin are a smattering of oddballs, but I guess everyone in this version of New York City is. Even the doctors seem unusual. I think the most normal of that medical trio is probably Dr. Lifflander, who is played by Bill Freeman, and I'm pretty sure the only reason that's the case is because that character dies before he's got a chance to do anything truly messed up. Because Needleman is played by Lloyd Pace. He's like a total alcoholic pervert. And Cutter, played by Diana Brown, strikes me as a manipulative bitch. Back to the hotel guests, though, we got Casey. She's played by Beverly Bonner. It's probably the most normal of the lot, but I'm going to be honest, and I'm probably going to piss a few of you off. I'm not sure what's going on with this performance. The dialogue is often raced through so fast it sounds like there was some sort of competition for who could finish the scene quicker. There are moments where she gets more conversational. You know, she gets more into the groove of having the conversation with the character she's playing opposite. One specific moment was when she tells Dwayne that he's starting to creep her out. That felt genuine. I also believed her fear when she discovered Belial in the room, flies out into the hallway and slams the door and starts screaming. I mean, that was a great performance in that scene, but it's just not consistent. Especially in the beginning takes, like the beginning scenes of the film, she's just like, she's walking and talking, and I mean, she is not letting the scene catch up. Anyway, it's nothing that ruins the film. In fact, it's part of the underlying charm. I think it's a memorable component of the film, but it's noticeable, and I guarantee you would not work well in any other type of movie. When it comes to Dwayne, played by Kevin Van Henenlotterr, it's really hard to boil down exactly why this performance works. It's quirky, it's over the top, it's somewhat rudderless, but again, for a Basky case, it plays well. Dwayne's a bit of a fish out of water when it comes to the city. He's clearly never been there, he clearly doesn't know his way around, or even how to interact with strangers if you think about it. Van Henenlotterr seems to approach this characteristic of Dwayne by playing him as a bit of a child, which to me made him seem even weirder. Sometimes the delivery and the behavior of Dwayne is so off, it made me question how the other characters wouldn't be freaked out by him altogether. Then again, everyone in this version of New York, you know, was a goddamn nut job. Except for maybe Sharon, played by Terry Susan Smith. Sharon's supposed to be the sort of girl next door, the innocent in all the horror. She's a receptionist at Needleman's office who Dwayne meets fairly early in the film and then immediately takes a liking to. They go on a date, whatever. I thought the performance was fine, but the character's a bit stupid. I mean, by the end of the film, she's literally begging to get let out of the room, and then she gets tossed into the hall, turns around, and immediately begs to be let back in. Make up your mind, woman. It's like the entire relationship begins and ends in 30 seconds, but I guess it's more on the writing than Smith's performance. Alright, so it's time to talk about who or what is in the basket. But before I get into that, I just want to say that they couldn't have thought of a more perfect name for the monster. Belial. If you're not familiar with theology, the name Belial is typically associated with evil, typically in the form of like a demon, or sometimes the devil itself. It could also be used to describe worthless or wicked people. I mean, it's almost like the name was crafted specifically for the character or vice versa. Anatomically, he's the lesser of the Bradley brothers, but he's also the wicked mastermind for what ensues. What's interesting about the look of Belial is that there's always a feeling that he's actively thinking about something. He's not just some dumb monster. There's a thought occurring, manipulation, scheming. He never speaks an audible word, but based on Dwayne's telekinetic conversations, it's clear he never shuts up. Everything about the design, even the odd breathing, which is weird, the random screaming, like when he pops up in the fucking window and screams, it's like, what? What is happening? I mean, it's clearly a puppet, it's a prop, but it still feels wildly unpredictable. Like at any moment, that basket will just spring open and Belial will rip you apart. I love the use of stop motion, which yes is imperfect, but it has its own undeniable artistic charm. Hell, I'd prefer stop motion over a lot of the shit CGI we currently get. I also think it was a smart choice to have the eyes glow red when he was plotting something sinister. Doing that made the static shots of the puppet have a living quality that would otherwise seem, I don't know, kind of corny. He's actually scarier when he's still. Like when he's just staring at whatever he's going to attack or thinking about something terrible and you could just tell it, he's more unnerving. Belial isn't the only special effect worth mentioning. Basket case is loaded with over-the-top gore gags. You get bodies getting ripped in half. O'Donovan, played by Joe Clark, gets torn up pretty bad. Mr. Bradley, played by Richard Pierce, getting split down the middle by that insane-looking Card of 1,000 Deaths thing in the basement. But I think the makeup effect that takes the cake is when Belial kills Dr. Cutter, because it's awesomely disturbing. It's just a great application. It's got the scalpel sticking out of a bloody face every direction. It's just nasty. Her reaction is nasty. The scream is terrible. Something about the framing and the way it's lit feels severely fucked up, and I love every frame of it. Okay, so I guess I'm at the point where I'll mention a few things that I found interesting or enjoyable about the film. You know, there's something visually intriguing about Dwayne lugging that oversized lock basket around with him all over New York City. It's unusual, but it adds a bit of behavior to an otherwise unassuming character. You know, it informs a lot of his actions, whether he's whispering or he just springs out of bed to run and get him out of the hallway. Then once the cat's out of the bag and we know what lurks within, it's like he's dragging around a time bomb into every scene or every scenario. And on the topic of Dwayne in the basket, I think it was smart to keep Belial a secret for as long as possible. Henenlotterr really used him intelligently, and every time he appeared on the screen, it raised attention quite a bit. Another smart choice from Henenlotterr was to use Dwayne's dream to act as Belial's journey towards the end of the film. Because for obvious reasons, having Belial run through the streets of New York City would have looked pretty bad. I mean, it wasn't an animatronic prop, so what? They would have had to either use stop motion for the entire thing, or literally drag it by fishing wire down the avenue. I mean, that would have looked just ridiculous. It would have been a mistake to keep what was written, and I think Henenlotterr discovered that in a nick of time, because his solution to fixing this problem, you know, having Dwayne run down the sidewalk naked, having Dwayne be the one who molests Sharon while she's sleeping, it made Dwayne's realization much stronger when he finally wakes up. And then once again, Basket Case does something that I typically can't stand: flashbacks. I do not like flashbacks. I think they're often a cop-out. This flashback, it's loaded with exposition, and I should hate it, but it's handled almost like a fairy tale, and for me, it worked. I love the shot of Dwayne and Belial eavesdropping on their father's meeting with the three doctors from the steps. I like their placement, how they're both looking through the beams. Likewise, the dining room operation was truly bizarre. That scene is just a nightmare. Could you imagine, like, just walking out and having a bunch of doctors sitting at your kitchen table ready to do an operation? That's wild shit. And then there's a scene where the aunt is reading the story with Belial in her arms. It was like a Nestle Toll House commercial from hell. The last thing I'll mention is the climax, which is ridiculous. It's tragic. It's funny all at the same time. You got Belial jumping into Dwayne. They go flying out a window. Then Belial starts choking Dwayne to death while they hang from the Hotel Broslin sign. And while all this is going on, some asshole calls up from the street, "Hey, you okay up there?" It's comically ridiculous. I also like how at the end, when Dwayne and Belial fought to their perceived deaths, they land connected at the hip, much like they arrived in this world. There's something strangely poetic about that visual, even if the goddamn camera can't stop jittering. Anyway, that's going to do it for this ramble on Basket Case. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Cinema Sanctum. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, share, and comment below, because I'm curious to read your thoughts on Basket Case. I'll see you next time.